Hey friends, and welcome back to Sewing from Scratch. If you're new here, I am Kate, and this is where I teach you everything I know about sewing, and we learn more together along the way. If you are not new here, you're probably like, why is she so dressed up? Usually she looks like a slob. I was just filming some of Valentine's Day content. Ooh, it was really fun. Not gonna be on this channel, but I'll be sure to share it on my Instagram when I can. So as you know from the title of the video, today I'm gonna be going through seam rippers. How do you rip out seams with 3 different kinds of seam rippers? So we're gonna go through the basic seam ripper, you know, the type that comes with your machine or that you get at the dollar store, has like a little red ball on it. We're also gonna be going through a more deluxe version. This is my personal preference between the basic and this type. I find it really, really fast, especially when we're ripping out serged seams. I'm gonna show you how to do that too. Super, super quick, super, super easy, and it'll make you just not dread it as much and not worry about making mistakes as much, which is really the best part. And then the last thing is we're gonna be going through how to use a razor blade, like a double-edged razor blade. This is what I use in my actual shaving razor. We're gonna see how to use it in the sewing room. And now, I'm gonna be completely honest, I've never done this. I haven't found the need to. So, we're gonna try it. I am going to let you know if I love this more than my current method or what. I will say it's a little more dangerous than any of the others because, you know, there's 2 blades and very, very sharp. So I don't want to be slicing myself or anything like that. I will say too, I have used, you know, like a detailed shaver or like a bikini trimmer or whatever you want to call it, nose hair trimmer, whatever it was. I've used that as well. It did go really, really fast, but I found that I needed to have a second set of hands. My husband was helping me. I think if you had a clamp or something, you could do it on your own and it was definitely fast, but definitely not necessary. Any of these lower cost options would be perfectly fine. All right, so without further ado, let's get into how to use a seam ripper. All right, so for each of the seam rippers, we're gonna be ripping on a straight seam, and I've done a 4-thread serge here in white thread. So let's just start with the basic seam rippers, and we're gonna seam rip a little bit on here and a little bit on here. So to get started seam ripping, I will start at a single stitch and work my way into the back stitch. So all you do is you take the pointy end of your seam ripper and slide it into a stitch here, being careful to only be catching the thread. So I'm only in the thread loop there. And then I just use that sharp part of the bottom of the blade to cut the thread. So you can see there that now the one side of the stitching is cut and then the back side is still intact. But if I go and slip my seam ripper in to the same area that I had ripped, you'll notice that it pops out and it's nice and loose. That is exactly what we want. We want that to be coming undone. So you can continue on here ripping every couple stitches, and so you can just go along and open up your stitches there. If you do cut through the thread that has already been cut, what you can do then is the thread should pull out like that. Now on the back, remember I said that it's coming undone there. All you have to do is use your seam ripper to cut that off, or you can use little snips if you like, and then get to wherever you're wanting to stop your seam ripping, and you just pull that thread out and you're left with an opening to fix or slide in if you forgot to leave an opening or whatever the reason. If you need to continue on all the way, you can definitely continue in that method all the way along, or to make things faster, you can open up your fabric, take your seam ripper and slide it in. Now, it is tempting to slide it in this way, but this little red ball is actually meant to go in this way to protect so you don't gouge your fabric with the sharp end when you're seam ripping. So you can slide it in this way, make sure you're aligned right on that stitching. We only want to be cutting the threads, and you're just going to gently move your seam ripper through inside of there so that we're ripping the stitches. And I especially like doing this when I'm at the back stitching part, just because it is a lot faster and easier. I would do this entire row like that as well if I had to rip all of this out. That's how you use a regular seam ripper on a regular seam. Now let's see how we do it with the serge seam. And it's going to be pretty similar. So to get started, what you want to do is locate your needle threads. So that's the ones closest to the inside of the garment. The outside here, these are your looper threads. We want to just focus on the needle threads because those are the ones that actually go through the fabric. So I'm just going to find some needle threads and start ripping them out. The left and right needle in my case. So I've ripped out 2 there. I've skipped 1 in between, and I've ripped out a set of needle threads here and here. And now again, it's going to be similar to what we did on the other stitch. With the serger, you'll have your tail here at the end. An easy way to get started can be to just snip that right off. Because if you're familiar with serging, you'll know that if you cut your serger tail right at the end, things will start to come apart on their own. So you can do that and then just slide your seam ripper in there again and get started that way. And then you'll continue on the same way. That is how I like to do it. Another way is to just rip every second or third needle stitch along here. Again, being careful that you're only grabbing the threads and not the actual fabric. And then once you have your needle threads ripped out, you can just go ahead and pull all these threads out. Sometimes they get tied up. You just go ahead and cut them this way. And once you have those cut, if they're not tied up, it just rips out. You don't have to even worry about the looper thread because they'll just pull out as one long piece at the end like that. So you're really only focusing on those needle threads, whether you stick your seam ripper in like this and slide it all the way along, or you do single rips like this. That is what you're going to focus on. If you were to slide it in here and just be ripping the loopers like so, then you're still gonna have your needle threads attached here, and you'll have to rip those out separately. So that's how we do that with a regular seam ripper. You can either go stitch by stitch or open it up and rip all at once. Now let's move on to the deluxe seam rippers. So these are actually called Pro Seam Ripper. I did give a set of these away in my 1,000 subscriber giveaway. I bought my own set at the same time that I ordered that. So you'll notice that in your set, there's two pieces, and they're actually different. The one has a pointier end and the other has a more blunt end. And they are both sharp inside the curve at the blade here. So this pointy one is more for getting the stitching ripping going, the start of it, where you can pull out the needles just like we did with our regular stitch ripper. This is more for when you're sliding down between the 2 layers of fabric and ripping out the entire seam. So we are going to use both. I will show you how to do that right now. Now, if you didn't purchase this set and you have something else, you might only have the blunt end, and that's perfectly fine. I often find myself not really using this pointy one anyway, but I am going to show you how to use it if that's what you're here for. So again, we're just going to locate a stitch, take our pointy end and slide it in there, and it cuts it so easily. So once you have a stitch or 2 ripped open, then you can open this up and find that, and you'll see that it made a hole there. And of course, it's still open here because I'm using the same fabric, but you would have that hole there. Now, of course, you can just pull and rip this, which could damage and stretch your fabric, or you can take this second seam ripper with the blunt end, and now you're going to slide that in there and just slice through. Probably shouldn't cut towards yourself, but you know, do what I say, not as I do. A really great way to do this is, especially if you have a long seam to do, is to hold it open like this and then kind of saw it back and forth. Now this is admittedly much easier if you have a clamp of sorts, those little tiny clamps that you can get, alligator clip or something like that, to clamp one end to a table or your ironing board or something, or even pin it. I've done that. And then you can hold this side with your one hand and use your other hand to saw through the stitching. So that's a very, very simple way to do that. I use this all the time. This is definitely my go-to. And as far as the serger goes, it's basically the two techniques we just talked about. So we're using this to make a weak spot in our seam, and then you can go ahead and open that up. Use your other tool to get in there and open that seam all the way up. And again, you can saw through it like this. So as with the regular stitch ripper, you can just cut through the needle threads, and then as you get to the end of that, you'll be left with a big long tail of looper thread once again that will just then pull all the way out. Okay, so finally we're gonna try out the razor blade. Now obviously this is what was used when you didn't own a stitch ripper, etc. I do know that there are people still who use this and prefer it. I think it's probably quick and that's why they do it. I would recommend not a double-ended razor blade. If you can just find a single-edged blade, then that would probably be best, but this is what I have because it's what I use in my bathroom, so let's try it out. So again, we're just going in between the fabric here, and it cuts like nobody's business. Look at that. So it is very, very quick. I am interested to see how you would, I'm not sure how you would get this started, you know, if this was a full seam. So let's pretend like this is my seam here. Now I do have a set of these very small, sharp, pointy-ended scissors. I am wondering if this is what was used to get things going in the first place. So I would definitely be able to do that, just to stick these in and start snipping the threads. I do that often actually, but if I didn't have those, let's see if I'd be able to just start ripping at the back stitching here. My concern is if you're not opening up an entire seam, if you're just opening part of a seam, then I'm not sure how you would get it started just with the razor blade. So you can see I'm not having too much trouble getting going here in the back stitching. This is a brand new sharp razor blade, so it is definitely doing the work that it needs to and cutting no problem. Now let's see how it works on a serger seam. You notice I left quite a bit here because I am very interested to see how this works. So again, like I said, it probably no problem if you already have the seam partway open. Maybe you realized your mistake as you were sewing and you didn't sew at all. But what happens if it's full, if it's a full seam? How are we going to start this? So again, you will likely have some sort of scissors. You could just cut the end of your serger tail off like that and then open it up and start ripping or slicing through there. However, again, what if I need to get in the middle here? I think we need to be using little snips. I don't feel like it's very safe to be slicing on your fabric just like that, although it would definitely work. You can see, well, I don't know if you can see, but I have definitely cut through those looper threads like no problem. So I am open into the loopers there now, and I would be able to open that up and then cut the needle threads. Another way, I guess, is you could open it up this way. So this would be the right side of your garment, how your seam would be, and then you would be able to get at the needles that way. Again, very risky, so I can't say I recommend that. I know there are tools that have that use razor blades, and it's like a handle and a little razor blade that sticks into it, which would probably have its own way of doing things. But if you are wanting to use just a razor blade that you have on hand at home, it would definitely work for most applications, and it will work for all applications, I believe, if you have a pair of these little snips to get into the threads to start your hole. I'm just getting in there with the razor blade, stretching it and then slicing it down. Again, this is probably the most risky of all of the three that I'm showing you, just because it is a very wide blade, but it definitely does the trick, and it is quite fast, and you can easily cut through the stitches. Thank you so much for sticking to the end and watching this video. I hope it was really helpful for you. Any way you do it is fine. It's gonna get the job done, but there's gonna be ways that do it faster and a couple ways that are gonna make it less likely to rip your fabric when you're doing it, because I'm sure we've all been there where we've sliced through the fabric that we didn't want to slice through. It was not part of the seam allowance, or maybe it was and we needed it to sew back onto. So that's always a really disheartening feeling, and we want to avoid that. So hope this was helpful. If it was, make sure you give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button so I can catch you in next week's video, and I'll see you there. Bye!